On the night he vows to retire, a roadside bobcat stares through wire and blinks back. "Don't move," he breathes. "She knows me." But how, when the state shipped her hundreds of miles away weeks ago? Sirens, signatures, a vanished kitten, and now this? What oath did he whisper to the dark, and why is she answering now? Frost clung to the welded mesh like lace, and beyond it the mountains held their breath. In the rehab yard, a juvenile bobcat paused at the wire, amber eyes catching the thin winter light and the reflection of a man in a weathered field jacket. She did not hiss. She did not puff. She listened, still as a stone that remembered running water. Jonah Hale stood a careful 2 strides back, boots planted in hoarfrost, hands open at his sides. He let the cold settle into his lungs before speaking, a voice pared smooth by years of night calls. "Easy, little traveler," he said, barely louder than the rustle of pine. "I'm not here to take anything from you." The bobcat's ear flicked, one precise stitch through silence. Her whiskers tilted forward. She tasted his breath, sifted his scent, then shifted her weight and edged closer, one paw length, then another, the pads placing themselves like notes at the end of a slow song. The wire divided meadow from metal, memory from medicine. From the office window, a text started to whisper, but Jonah lifted a finger without looking. "Let the quiet do the work," he murmured. The kitten stopped with her nose a handspan from the mesh. The gold in her eyes darkened to copper, then softened to honey. She blinked once, long and deliberate. No surrender, only choice. Jonah answered with the same slow blink and let his gaze fall to the side, offering space the way a door offers a room. Wind combed the grass beyond the pens. Snow creaked. Between them, the world narrowed to breath and blinking, to a line of wire and a possibility. "You can keep all the distance you need," Jonah said. "I'll keep the promise." Her tail tip drew a tiny circle. He kept the retirement forms in his glove box like a dare he wasn't ready to accept. Dr. Jonah Hale, 67, moved through the valley by habit, gravel roads memorized by tires, porch lights that blinked twice for help, barns where calves came backward at 3 a.m. He could stitch a tear with his eyes half closed and read a fever from the way a horse leaned into a fence. Competence had become its own kind of sleep. Once, though, he had been the boy who slept on clinic floors and learned the quiet of wild cats. In his 20s, he volunteered at a coastal rehab where every enclosure had a name and a story. He learned to count breaths without a clock, to let silence do the asking, to say only what the animal could use. A mentor pressed a round tin into his palm, star charts under a scratched lid, constellations inked in blue. "When you can't find your way," the man said, "borrow theirs." Years layered over those nights, mortgages, regulations, the paper fog of compliance. Wonder thinned, not from cruelty, but from repetition. He wore it like an old jacket. On Jonah's left hand, a pale seam crossed the web between thumb and forefinger, a souvenir from a trap-cut snare decades ago. When winter ached in his knuckles, he rubbed that scar and remembered what it had cost to remove a wire without losing trust. "Last season," he told the truck cab. "One more winter, then I hang it up." The heater coughed. The radio muttered grain prices and weather warnings. He shut it off and let the valley static through, ravens, fence rattle, snow ticking at the windshield. At home, he set the tin on the table and flipped it open. Orion, Canis Major, grease smudges where his thumb had stalled over distances. He breathed until his thoughts matched the slow rhythm on the page. "Hold fast," he said to no one in particular. The phrase had outlived mentors, marriages, and a thinning roster of friends. He was good at leaving. He had practiced it for years. He just hadn't practiced staying for the reason that started everything. Snow came down in hurried flakes when the call hit dispatch. Unknown kitten under County Road 9, culvert, possibly domestic. The deputy's breath rasped across the radio, and a chorus of guesses followed. Feral, lynx mix, somebody's dumped pet. Paperwork already coiled around the uncertainty like wire. Jonah took the turn-off before the plough, gravel skittering under his tires, the culvert crouched in a ditch of slush and soda cans. A small body trembled in the mouth of the tunnel, tawny, spattered with spots, ears tufted like punctuation. The tail was a twitch, a metronome counting down. "She'll bolt," the deputy said, easing his flashlight lower. "Or bite. You want animal control?" "No control," Jonah answered, "just less light." He lowered to the ice-slick edge and spoke the way he would to a horse that had learned pain. "Easy, traveler, I'm staying right here." He slid a fleece over his forearms, hands open, moving inches at a time. The kitten's ribs lifted too fast, vapor puffing in quick ghosts. A burr-laced flank shivered, then stilled as his voice found a runway between fear and cold. The deputy killed the beam, the ditch darkened to a dusk. "Domestic or wild?" the deputy asked. "Because the paperwork—" "Alive first," Jonah said. "Names later." He angled the soft carrier beside the culvert and let silence do most of the inviting. A long minute, another. Then a paw, the smallest decision, touched nylon. He smelled ammonia and wet metal, milk gone sour on breath. He did not reach. "Breathe with me, little comet," he said, set his cadence, slow and even, and waited until her lungs borrowed it. 1, 2, 1, 2. She stepped into the carrier and folded on the fleece. No hiss, no puff, just defeat, thin as thread. Jonah eased the zipper until only air and the future could pass. He tucked a hand against the mesh and felt the slightest warmth answer. "Domestic," the deputy tried again. "Wild enough to deserve a chance," Jonah said, and stood with the storm in his lashes. The clinic after hours was a hush made of hums, heater, IV pump, the faint tick of snow at the pane. Jonah set the soft carrier on the treatment table and worked deliberately. No petting, no reach. A heat pad slipped under a crate, towel over the top to make a dim tent. Fluids warmed between his palms until they felt like breath. He noted the burrs, the dehydration pinch, the bruised cuticle where a snare might have kissed and missed. The kitten watched without showing teeth, amber eyes rimmed in fatigue. Sound found her first, his baritone testing the room, low and even. "You don't owe me fear," he said, as much to himself as to her. "We'll go slowly." He slid a dish half full of electrolyte near the mesh and waited. The scent reached her next. She lifted her nose, drew the mineral sweetness through the back of her mouth, considered, and did not move. He did not correct her. "Drift on the tide, little comet," he murmured, opening the tin of star maps by habit, tracing Orion with a fingertip in the lamplight. Minutes became a patient animal of their own. The pulse in his wrist steadied into something the room could use. The kitten's ears tilted, not toward the dish yet, but toward his sleeve, where that pulse tapped quietly against cloth. He did not offer fingers. He offered duration. First feeds are always negotiations. A catheter if needed, a micro syringe if not. He coaxed a bead onto the lip of the dish, tapped the mesh lightly with the blunt end. Tick. A neutrally coded signal. She drifted forward a paw's width, then another. Tongue flick. Bead gone. "That's it," he whispered. "Borrow my rhythm." From the doorway, a tech breathed. "She's eating." Choosing, Jonah said. That's better. He marked tiny victories on a card, laps counted, refusals respected, stress yawns logged. When her lids lowered, he answered with a slow blink and turned his gaze aside. Keep the wild, he said, into the tented dark. I'll keep the watch. Morning brought an email, not a question. Transfer authorized. Temporary quarantine. Municipal shelter. Chain of custody. Signatures. A van with a logo brighter than the sun on frozen asphalt. Jonah packed the crate with the same care he'd use for a beating heart and rode behind, jaw locked, hands flat on his knees. The shelter's lights were a permanent noon. Fluorescents buzzed, metal doors answered with clatter. A staffer read the script. Intake, hold, quarantine, no outside handling. The kitten's pupils pinned, breath feathering too fast. Her crate slid into a row of stainless boxes, each a mirror, each a room, without corners. Just until the permit clears, someone said, already walking. Rules are rules. In quarantine, sound multiplied. A mop bucket rang, a dryer thumped. The kitten folded into the back, turned to shadow, and stopped eating. Overnight, she grew a pale notch on her flank where the fur thinned, the body spending coin it did not have. Jonah watched from the glass and pressed 2 fingers to his wrist to keep his voice even. She's a bobcat, not a behavior case, he told the supervisor. Give me custodial access and quiet hours. Doctor, came the smile that shut doors. We can't make exceptions. He filed appeals until the printer warmed the room. He called the state biologist, the county clerk, anyone with a seal. Her appetite is a thread, he said. You've cut it. The phone made the sound of snow, static, pretending to be weather. At the window, he showed her the slow blink anyway. Her ears lifted, then fell, a metronome that lost the beat. He rubbed the white seam across his palm, the old snare memory bright as fresh pain. Hold fast, he whispered to steel and air. I'll come back. I promise. Security turned the key. Fluorescent noon swallowed the door. Outside, his breath smoked and vanished before it could mean anything. The mountains kept his echo, giving nothing back. The approval came as a single-line email at 4:12 a.m. Temporary medical custody granted. Quiet hours authorized. Jonah read it twice, then unlocked the clinic and made the room thinner. Lights low, machines muted, towel doors softening the clang of metal. He changed into the same washed cotton jacket he always wore, unscented soap, line-dried, pockets empty, but for a round tin of stars. He set boundaries like furniture. A taped line 2 strides from the mesh, his stop. A small perch inside, a flat river stone as a station. A bamboo dowel wrapped with blue tape, target stick, tucked into his sleeve. He sat on a low stool angled at 45 degrees, never squaring up, letting his profile make less noise in the air. Your pace, not mine, he said, voice set to metronome. Food is not a bribe, it's a bridge. Tube feeding, measured and merciful, shifted to a syringe of slurry taped to the mesh. He waited until her breathing dropped from panic to watchfulness before nudging the target through, cotton tip barely inside, still as a star. The tip carried nothing but clean cloth and time. She examined. She did not touch. He withdrew without asking for more. He rehearsed the ritual until the room knew it. Approach, pause, count to 5, breath on the downbeat, retreat. No reaching, no glory, only consistency. When staff asked, "Is she bonding?" he shook his head. "She's rehearsing freedom." A junior tech whispered, "Wouldn't a quick scruff calm her faster?" Jonah didn't turn. Faster for whom? We are not training trust. We are proving we won't steal it. On the 3rd evening, a paw slid forward, and hesitated over the river stone. He slowed his voice into long vowels. "There you are." The pause settled. Tap. He marked the moment with the dowel on the stone, a neutral tick. A beat later, her nose touched the cotton tip. He did not celebrate. He kept the time. He began pairing the slow blink with a whisper of constellation names, not for meaning but texture. Cassiopeia, Perseus, Canis Major. Names that stretched his vowels and lowered his heartbeat. "Keep the wild," he told the dark. "I'll keep time." By week's end, the syringe moved 2 inches farther from the mesh. She stepped to meet it, tail tip drawing a small cursive. She ate, then sat, then looked past him at the yard where wind braided the grass. He stayed behind the taped line and listened to her breathing answer his own, 2 steady instruments finding the same tempo. The email landed like a gavel. Capacity exceeded. Federal partner accepted intake. A follow-up call arrived before coffee. "We've secured a placement out of state," the coordinator said. "Specialized facility, more room, more staff." Jonah stared at the taped line on the floor, the blue dowel leaning against the wall like an unplayed note. "Best for her is quiet, familiar, predictable," he said. "Continuity is treatment." "Doctor, a slot like this doesn't open twice." Papers arrived in a stack: chain of custody, transport authorization, interstate health certificate. A courier crate rolled in with orange dot stickers like warning petals. He printed her card one last time. BC-47, provisional name Nova. He didn't say it aloud. He set the round tin of stars in his pocket and rehearsed the ritual one more time. Approach, pause, slow blink, breath on the downbeat. On the other side of the mesh, the bobcat lifted her head at his voice, ears tilting to catch the rhythm. "She'll ride at dawn," the coordinator said from the doorway. "Sign here." Jonah signed. The pen felt heavier than the page deserved. "I won't crowd the crate," he said, as if asking permission. "No exceptions," the coordinator replied. "We keep stress minimal." Logistics cut the morning into narrow strips. Tags snapped onto latches, zip ties cinched, a barcode blinked alive. "Route B, 8 hours," the driver called. "Fuel at mile 143, no stops otherwise." The crate slid into the van with a metallic gasp. "Hold fast," Jonah whispered to the dark grille. The van door clapped, turning breath into echo. The road took her like a river taking a leaf, clean, efficient, indifferent. He followed in his truck for a mile, then 2, then let the tail lights become another constellation he couldn't keep. "It's best for her," he told the windshield. The words tasted like aspirin. Back at the clinic, the room felt wrong-sized. The taped line led nowhere. The dowel leaned, silent. He opened the tin, traced Orion, and set his breathing to the old pattern because patterns were what he had left. "Find your sky, Nova," he said to the empty mesh. "I'll be here to count it when you do. Always." Weeks unspooled like tape, with nothing recorded. Jonah checked his inbox before sunrise, after midnight, at red lights he would never admit to. No reply from the out-of-state rehab. On day 11, a subject line arrived without a greeting. BC-47 stable. No attachment, no vitals, no plan. He read it 3 times as if warmth might appear between the words. The clinic's waiting room clock hiccuped every 49 seconds, losing time nobody wanted. He opened the tin of stars and set Orion over the blotter, a paper sky he could control. He tried voicemail in the neutral voice meant for skittish owners. "Dr. Hale following up on the Bobcat transfer. Any feeding latency updates? Exposure circuits?" Static ate the edges. He swallowed and tried again with vowels stretched low. "If she's hearing a different cadence now, keep it." Don't replace it with mine if it costs her. The machine answered with its rubber sentence. Your message has been received. Jonah nodded to no one. Then receive this. He leaned back and let the ceiling hear it. Hold fast. A heifer carved breach at 3 a.m. He worked by headlamp while sleet needled the roof, shoulders burning, mind counting breaths that weren't his. Driving home, he killed the radio and spoke into the unlit cab. Did my voice matter, or just the metronome of it? A week later, another email, BC 47 stable. He printed it, a white square with a black certainty. He taped it to the window facing the empty pen. Answer me with anything, he told the paper. A comma will do. Outside, wind carried the sound of a train that wasn't coming. Inside, the clock lost another minute. They let him in at first light, the corridor smelling faintly of bleach and pine. A laminated placard read, Observation only, no contact. Jonah stood at the taped line, 45 degrees to the mesh, hands open and empty. Behind a monitor, the behaviorist clicked the camera live. Baseline latency to emerge has been variable, she said. Please keep your voice low. He nodded, throat dry. He felt foolish for rehearsing vowels in the truck, for bringing the dented tin of stars in his pocket like a talisman. He fixed his breath to a slow count and let silence swing the door inside the room. From the shadowed den box, 2 ears lifted, fine black tufts pricking the air. The bobcat took the doorway in pieces, whiskers first, then nose, then the long elastic of her spine unfolding. She tested the light, she tested the corridor, she tested him last, as if saving the hardest question for the end. Jonah did not look straight on. Easy, traveler, he said, voice rolled down to velvet. No one's here to take. His words fell like small, even stones into a still pond. Her pupils cinched, then widened, then settled to a steady amber. The behaviorist leaned closer to the screen. Heart rate is dropping, she murmured, surprised into honesty. Look at that ear angle, rightward bias, that's orienting. The kitten stepped to the mesh, the tail tip, drawing a shy question mark. She inhaled, sorting breath from memory, metal from winter, and the particular, unrepeatable human who had once said a promise into her darkness. Something loosened under the ridge of her shoulders. The hush grew body. Jonah lowered his lashes in a long blink and turned his gaze to the side. Borrow this rhythm, he whispered. Take only what you need. He could feel the room's heartbeat meet his own and flatten into a single line of time. Don't move, the behaviorist said, though he hadn't. Whatever you're doing, it's not typical. The bobcat blinked back, a deliberate shudder, not fear, not fatigue. She shifted, placing one forepaw exactly on a scuffed knot in the concrete, then let her weight melt into the stance. Breath braided with breath across wire. She recognizes him, someone breathed behind the glass. Jonah swallowed a heat that felt like winter breaking. He kept to the line. I kept the watch, he told her softly. You kept the wild. Her tail traced a small circle of agreement. The room exhaled. A door inside an old story swung open, not with noise, but with the sound of something unguarding itself at last. Days unfurled into measurements, and the measurements began to sing. On day 2 after reunion, latency to emerge dropped from 90 seconds to 46. By day 5, the kitten stepped out at 21 seconds, even with a clipboard rustling. The behaviorist traced the curve with a capped pen and said, That's not chance. Jonah kept the ritual strict as weather, same jacket, same hour, the same oblique stance at the taped line. He did not make himself larger, He made himself predictable. When he spoke, the syllables landed evenly, a quiet drum beneath the room. Take what you want. I will not close the distance. Feeding shifted from edge of mesh to a station 2 paw lengths inside. Scatterfeed became small trails, quail's scent feathering across straw. A mouse thawed and halved and tucked under a cardboard tube so she would have to choose curiosity over caution. She chose. Wait, she's eating with the lights on, a tech whispered, astonished. Exploratory loops widened, first a circle that touched the riverstone and snapped back, then a figure 8 that included the perch, the water pan, the den box, and finally, the far wall where shadow thickened. Startle recovery shortened too when a tray clanged. Her breathing rose and fell back to baseline in 90 seconds, then 80, then 60. We don't see that slope, the behaviorist said, printing a bar graph she kept shaking her head at. Not this soon. On day 9, a fecal cortisol panel returned with a number that would have been a good week, not a good afternoon. Either our model is wrong, she muttered, or this cat has decided to heal. Jonah didn't look away from the mesh. She's decided we don't steal what isn't offered. The alopecia notch on her flank filled in, a fuzz first, then fur that took the light like brushed copper. She began to pause at the water pan and dab 1 paw, then 2, as if remembering creaks. At the end of 1 session, she placed a forepaw on the riverstone and held his gaze until he gave the slow blink. Then she looked past him to the rectangle of yard beyond the corridor door. Not yet, he said, and the words carried both restraint and hope. We'll move only when you ask. That evening she initiated play. 1 pounce at the burlap knot, then a second. The room felt wider. Finally. The behaviorist capped the pen at last. Whatever this is, it's working. Don't name it, Jonah answered. Just keep the time. They held the meeting with maps spread. Coffee cold while winter shoved at the windows. If we wait until spring, the coordinator began, we reduce risk. We increase captivity, the behaviorist said. She tapped a graph. Loops are widening. Startle recovery is within release norms. Jonah studied the topo lines leading back toward the foothills. Soft release, he said. Pen on the south face near the old aspen cut. Not the culvert, too human. 2 weeks of acclimation, then an open gate. Telemetry? A warden asked. Light collar, biodegradable weak link, the behaviorist answered. No bells, no bulk. We need data, not drag. Paper-made dry decisions, permits, site checks, ID bait supplier, crew schedules. They chose a date between storms, a wedge of weather no one trusted but wanted. Someone circled it in red, as if color could swear an oath. In the enclosure that evening, Jonah let his voice step back. He stopped before the taped line, and then stopped again, 1 more stride farther than habit. The bobcat watched, ears slanting to measure the new distance. He let the silence stand between them like a door half open. We're trading closeness for usefulness, he said. I'm going to get smaller. Back in his office, he opened the dented tin and slid a yellow legal sheet underneath. He wrote a letter headed for interns who will arrive after me. He made it a protocol in sentences instead of bullets. Presence is medicine when measured. Distance is respect when chosen. Do not name your need kindness. Do not take what isn't offered. Let the animal keep the story that makes it wild. If you speak, speak to the rhythm, not the fear. If you cannot help, leave. He signed without flourish. Hold fast. Hail. He set the paper on the star charts, aligning the crease of Orion's belt with the date. Outside, wind combed the yard grass toward the mountains. Mesh, he thought, becomes gate when the animal chooses it. Find your sky, he told the empty room. I'll be outside the frame. Dawn took the frost in a single breath and made it glitter. The soft release pen sat on the south face, pale sun pressed to wire, the gate latched to a pulley and a quiet plan. Jonah arrived early, jacket zipped, pockets empty. He checked the water, the shelter box, the perch with the river stone. Nothing extra, nothing that would cling. The team stood back at the tree line. "No one crowd," the behaviorist said. "No names, minimal voice." Jonah nodded and moved to his taped mark, this time even farther than before. The bobcat paced a lean figure eight, nose stuttering at seams, ears sampling the weather for meaning. Somewhere beyond the slope, a creek spoke in thawed syllables. "Ready," the warden whispered. Jonah set his breath and lifted 2 fingers to the behaviorist. The latch sighed. The gate drew up an inch, then 2, then enough to make a decision real. Cold air rolled in, pine resin and old leaves, a story older than policy. The bobcat froze, then lowered her chin and tasted the world, mouth parted to catch what couldn't be seen. "Take the time you need," Jonah said, barely sound. "I won't follow." She padded to the threshold and stopped with her toes on light. A wind thread combed her whiskers. She looked left, then right, then back at the man who had made his voice a bridge and refused to walk across it. He gave her the long blink and turned his gaze to the ground. Her tail tip described a small circle. She stepped through. Grass gave instead of ringing. The first 3 strides were careful, the next 3 certain, the 7th a vanish into willow shade. A magpie heckled once and lost interest. Jonah did not exhale until the hillside folded her in. "Gate stays open," the warden said. "Of course," the behaviorist answered, already writing. Jonah remained at the mark. "Go live big," he said, to the low branches, the creek, the brightening sky. The phrase felt lighter this time, like something handed back. Later, cameras would show a pattern. Hikers passed and she became terrain. Field techs swapped batteries and she watched without alarm. A familiar baritone drifted on the wind and she did not appear, choosing distance over reunion. Choice had been the point all along. Wire had called her to live. Meadow answered. Jonah stood very still and let wonder return. Along the cutbank above Jonah Hale's old fence line, frost held to the sedges like small stars. The trail camera blinked its red heartbeat and went dark, batteries spent. A tech in a canvas jacket picked her way down the deer path, boots making syllables in clay. The cap on her head bore a stitched constellation, 3 bright stitches for Orion's belt, hand-sewn from a vet's patch. She paused at the camera, turned herself to 45 degrees, and spoke to the air the way she'd been taught. "No surprises, I'm just changing the batteries." The creek answered with a thin, glassy note. Across the channel, a shape sifted out of willow light. A mature female bobcat, coat the color of dry grass warmed by sun. Behind her, a long-legged yearling stopped and pressed its whiskers to the wind. The mother set one paw on a flat rock and watched, not pinning, not shrinking, only measuring. Her tail tip drew a small, patient circle. The tech lowered her eyes and made herself smaller. She did not look for the second cat again. She opened the housing, counted under her breath. 1, 2, 3. The batteries slid home with a soft click. "Hold fast," she whispered, startled by the old phrase in her mouth. From the foothills a gust carried the clean, paper smell of snow. The female's ears tipped, then eased. She blinked once, long and unhurried. The yearling copied imperfectly, blink-halting, then tested the creek's scent again. On the path back, the tech kept her voice low on the radio. "Camera 4 reset, company present, no alarm." The dispatcher laughed softly. "Copy. Try not to autograph the hillside." "Not my story," she said, and touched the star patch. Behind her, the cutbank turned ordinary again. Eyes remained bright as winter water, watchful, unafraid, undecided. Evening laid a pale coin on the creek, and Jonah Hale followed the logging road he had walked since before his hands began to shake. The mountains wore a thin breath of snow. The aspen cut ran the color of old paper. He tucked a single sheet into his jacket, creased at the fold. His letter, rewritten by steadier, younger hands, signed the same. "Hold fast, Hale." At the bend where willow tresses curtained the water, a log bridged shadow to shadow. She was there already, as if the woods had kept the appointment, a thick-shouldered bobcat, muzzle frosted, a pale scar drawing a comma over her left shoulder. She stood in profile, not claiming the crossing, not yielding it, only being the sentence the creek wrote. Jonah stopped well short of the bank. He let the ache settle and lowered his gaze until his eyes saw only ripples. "I didn't bring a story," he said, "just time." Across the water, her ears found him. The tail tip drew a careful circle. She breathed once, and the air around the log held still. He answered with a slow blink and a small tilt of head that said he had not forgotten his place. "You kept the wild," he said, voice scraped but warm. "Thank you for letting me keep the watch." His breath stuttered. The woods waited. A raven clucked, reconsidered, and flew on. She shifted her weight and blinked back, deliberate, unafraid, not asking, not offering. Then she stepped from the log to the leaf-littered bank and vanished between spruce trunks, a door closing without a latch. He did not follow. The quiet creek kept the evening's secret. He sat on the gravel and read the letter aloud one last time. Presence is medicine when measured. Distance is respect when chosen. Do not take what isn't offered. If you speak, speak to the rhythm, not the fear. He folded it to the crease and smiled. Go live big. Years later, interns held that letter like a map. Protocols cited it by number. The rule that saved the most was simplest. When the wild looked back and blinked, they blinked too, and stayed where they were. Thank you for watching until the end. If this story touched your heart even a little, that's our greatest joy. If you'd like, please share your thoughts in the comments. We'll keep bringing you stories that stay with you, so please consider subscribing to the channel. See you in the next video.